We are very sorry for the technical difficulties. And Donna, I'm not able to see if how many people are joining or if anyone's joined yet.
People have joined.
Okay, great. Okay, we apologize for the delay. We are having some technical difficulties with sound and audio on this end. Christy Miller has been unable to join with video and audio at the same time. So I think we've got her now on with just audio. So welcome, Christy, are you there?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Okay, yes, we can hear you. So unfortunately, Christy can't join through her computer. So that means we're just going to hear her speak. And hopefully we're going to advance the slides in the right way to keep tempo with her talk. But first of all, I just want to welcome everybody today. And again, apologies for the delay. And just let you know that Cloet is very proud to be able to offer this event today. So a big welcome to everyone. This is part of our series that we're running with speakers, followed by an event after each speaker event. There's another event happening the following week called Glow Ed in the Boardroom, where we will invite you to join to have a discussion about more about what we learned in today's talk and what it may have stimulated for you in terms of thoughts and actions. It's to replace really the networking that would have happened if we had had a speaker event like this in person. But due to COVID, obviously, we're doing all of this online. So what I'd like to do now is just move into discussing a little bit more about Christy. So Christy Miller, who's joining us today, is someone I got to know. She gave a talk to a business group I belong to, just all about her kind of life experience and her transition in her career. And I thought it would be interesting for this group to hear more from a woman who's developed a successful career and then decided to step out of that and look for something new and trying to sort of work through the process of figuring out what her next big thing is. So a little background on Christy. She is a Vancouver native, grew up here, but went away to university in McGill, where she did a degree in history and Russian studies. And that ended up taking her for 2 years to Russia, where she worked as an investment officer for the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. And she discovered in that career there in Russia that she was really passionate about working with entrepreneurs. And when she came back to Canada, she did some stints in the Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce and Van City Credit Union. And then in 2010, she founded First West Capital, which is a company that supplies funding to businesses, and they funded over 100 businesses. And while she was there, she led the evolution of the company's vision, mission, and values, and really developed its brand position as the Canadian leader in junior capital financing. So for all of us in education, that might sound very complex, but the point is that she had a very successful career. And in 2019, last year, she won the Entrepreneur of the Year Award for Western Canada. And then this year in January 2020, she decided to leave the company that she co-founded and is in a process now of reestablishing herself. And we invited her to share that experience, because even though she's coming from a different industry, the process of sort of discovering who you are and what you want to do next and how you find that and then how you take steps to action on that is the same across all industries. So I'm going to turn it over now to Christy and let her take over. Christy, we've got a first slide up, which is the January 2020 file. Comment.
Awesome. All right. So thank you everyone for joining us today over lunch. And Tamsin, thank you for this invitation. Looking forward to chatting with you. And I just want you all to know, even though you can't see it because of some of our tech challenges, I put on mascara for all of you. So I hope you appreciate it. My mascara hasn't seen a lot of action the last few months. So I appreciate you tuning in to kind of hear my story, and I look forward to the Q&A later on. Donna and Tamsin, I'll leave it to you guys to kind of curate what the questions are since I can't see them. So thank you for providing sort of the background for me in terms of, my education and professional background. I won't repeat it. We're short on time, and so I think we want to cut right to the juicy stuff. So I'll give maybe a little bit of background to round out what Tamsin has said. I've also been pretty active in terms of community involvement and as a volunteer. So I've been on a variety of nonprofit boards. My focus has always been kids and sports and entrepreneurship, and ideally 2 out of 3. So to give you a flavor of the things that I've worked with, I'm former chair of the BC Provincial Child Care Council. I did that for 6 years. I served on the Vancouver International Marathon Society board. I was on the board of the Association of Women in Finance. I'm just about to roll off the board of Junior Achievement of BC after having served for 7 years. So I've always been quite engaged in the community, and that I think will be a theme that continues into my next chapter. So as Tamsin alluded to, and I'm moving on to slide 4 here, in January of this year, I decided to take a step back. The 10 years that I spent with First West Capital were among the most stimulating and rewarding and challenging years of my life to this point. And of course, last year was a big year in terms of recognition. Not only was there the nod from EY, but there was also, I finished my Institute of Corporate Directors course and was chosen as class valedictorian. I made the list of BC Business's most influential women in finance. So it was a big year. And so, of course, the question is, why step back from that, kind of at the pinnacle? And so that takes us to slide 5. And I guess really, really candidly, first and foremost, I was tired. These were really interesting years. Started the fund in 2010, so it was really the middle of the last recession. It was a tough time to fundraise. It was a tough time to find good quality deal flow. And I spent most of my career in the money business. So took a big risk at a risky time, and it worked out. But I sort of, in some ways, feel like I aged in dog years through the process. At the same time, started First West Capital in October of 2010, and I'm married with 3 children, and our youngest was born in February of 2010. So, starting up a new business at a risky time in the economy and coming home and nursing our new baby all night, it was an exhausting combination. And I feel like I spent the 10 years of my youngest son's life building this business, and it took a toll on my family. The world is a little different now. I think COVID is forcing us all to reevaluate our priorities in terms of how we travel, our work-life balance. But in November of 2019, as one example, I think I had 22 hotel nights. We were expanding the business internationally, attending conferences across the country, and it was just a grueling grind. So I was tired. It was having negative effects on my family and certainly my work-life balance. But also, the way First West Capital was set up, it was as a subsidiary of a credit union, First West Credit Union. And the equity that I had was shadow equity, not explicit equity. And as the credit union, sorry, you might hear some groaning in the background. That's my 22-week-old Bernese Mountain Dog puppy who refuses to leave my side. So I apologize for that. But as the business operated as a subsidiary of a financial institution, and over time, some differences in strategic vision really floated to the surface. And so it became really just not that fun anymore. And, in my experience, when you're doing something that truly inspires and motivates you, it completely energizes you, it completely fills your cup. But as those differences in vision start to deepen and you couple that with fatigue and family imbalance, it becomes something that's just not sustainable. So for those reasons, I made the decision in January to step back. And I'm moving on now to slide 6. So my plan initially was to just recharge, spend some time with my kids, get my garden under control, get a dog, Plan A was to spend some time in Thailand at a vegetarian yoga retreat. My husband called it probably in the third week of January. He said, that's just not going to happen. So I said, okay, all right, I won't do Thailand. Instead, all of this will, pass, this whole COVID nonsense will go away by late spring. So how about I go and walk El Camino in Spain? So that was plan B, and I was all booked and ready to go. I had my lightweight sleeping bag and my walking shoes and my guide. But that, as we all now know, didn't come to pass either. So moving down to slide 7. And hopefully somebody will let me know if there are issues with flow or sound quality. But I'll just keep rolling unless I hear otherwise. So this is my little, everything's good? Okay.
Yeah, it's good.
All right, so in terms of what actually happened, obviously the world basically was completely paralyzed. Everyone went into isolation effectively, effective March 13th. It didn't blow over. As you know, things got easier through the summer as the world moved outside, but the world effectively hibernated, or at least that was my perspective on it, for March, half of March, all of April, all of May, and there was a tiny little bit of, resurgence in June as we got towards the summer. So instead of going to Thailand, instead of walking El Camino, my R&R plan, my rejuvenation, my recharge plan, really centered on homeschooling our youngest. We're lucky enough to have a place on the water on the Gulf Islands. So we lived over there we probably spent half of the year so far living over there. I was able to homeschool our 10-year-old, which at first was lovely, truly. The first 2 weeks after spring break, as many of you know, there was no assigned curriculum, and so we were making it up as we went along. And we had projects identifying local trees and learning about local animals and foraging for things. We planted a garden, started the seeds inside very early, and it was charming and lovely and just a great bonding and nesting experience. What we discovered over time is that the homeschooling got old. It became, I just wasn't that good at it, frankly. But we did get a puppy, and we did grow a garden, and we did spend lots of time outside in the kayaks and lots of time on Zoom. So it was a different spring than I had anticipated, but one that brought with it some real joys as well, and a lot of time for self-reflection. We also made maybe the counterintuitive decision over spring break to stage and list our house for sale. And that was a strange experience. Our initial thinking was, a couple of realtors had gotten great results in our neighborhood. We thought that with people trapped at home staring at the same 4 walls, that perhaps they might be interested in a different 4 walls. And so we staged the house, and April and May were absolutely surreal. At the end of May, our middle child, our older son, came home from studying abroad. We had to take the house off the market for him to self-quarantine. And once that was up, we relisted, and it was a different world in June. And at that point, we had competing offers and sold the house, and it actually closes tomorrow. And that's relevant in terms of learnings for me in this process of exploration. It's relevant for reasons I'll circle back to at the end. But that's what actually happened. So it wasn't El Camino, it wasn't Thailand. It was, an intense and different and powerful spring, but not at all what I had planned. And I'm sure many of you have similar types of stories. So I had lots of time to think about what I was going to do. And I have a mentor. I've had many mentors, but each year I'm in a formal mentorship program. And this year's mentor said to me, you have to have at least 14 things in your cart in terms of ideas, what to do next, before you can take anything out. So I spent most of the spring filling my cart with ideas. And at the end of it, I decided that I'm not ready to retire. I have a milestone birthday coming up later this year. I turn 50. I hate to admit it, I turn 50 in about 6 weeks. And I decided that I have a lot of energy. I'm absolutely not ready to retire. So I knew that retirement was only theoretically an option. It wasn't a practical one. I also, spent a lot of time thinking about a fintech idea that I have, and I'm happy to, go into more detail around that if you're interested. But I decided ultimately that I didn't want to do it by myself, and the timing wasn't quite right. I still think I have, and I put a lot of time into researching it, but I don't think I can do it now, and I don't want to do it by myself. In terms of executive roles, I thought really hard about this. I'm not great with organizational politics. I know how the game is played. I can see the game being played, and at times played well around me. But I've always been a belief in merit and competence. And so I'm not sure if I want to burn the calories that are required to function, in a senior executive role in a large organization with board dynamics and all of that. So I haven't really found, a board or an executive opportunity rather that appeals. Two interesting ones came across my desk this week that have given me pause for thought. And I'll probably throw my name in the ring for those, but I'm being very, very selective on, the executive side because I just don't want politics to be a big part of my life. The red line in this slide is really the dividing line between things I've either decided in general not to do or not to do now. And those below the red line are things that I definitely do want to do. And so what I am pursuing right now concurrently is board work, both nonprofit and corporate, mentorships, consulting work, and the idea of starting another fund. And so let me walk you through sort of where I'm at with each of those. And I've made a conscious decision not to pursue one thing exclusively for a couple of reasons. One is variety. I like having variety. In my professional life up to this point, one of the things I've enjoyed most is the ability to work with many companies at many different stages with different needs. Each deal structure is a little bit different. Each personality or constellation of personalities is a little bit different. And I enjoy the range and the variety that affords me. So variety is important to me, so I'm pursuing multiple things. Diversification is also important to me. I want to do a variety of things, but I want to not ever just do one anymore because I'm concerned, in this environment with COVID, I'm not sure which one will get traction. I'm not sure exactly what the economy will hold. And as in biology, diversity equals stability. So I'm really making a conscious effort to give myself variety, both because that's the kind of brain food that I like, but also because I believe that diversity is a more stable, long-term approach. So I want to manage a portfolio of interests. Mentorship, pursuing that. Actually, let's just move down to slide 9 and I'll jump right into some of the board work that I'm currently doing. So what I'm going to share with you is not just the what I'm doing in terms of these positions, but I think what might be more interesting is the process as to how each of these opportunities came about, because I think in that there might be some shared learnings. So in terms of community or nonprofit boards, I was appointed to the Douglas College board in the spring. That sort of came fairly quickly after stepping back from First West Capital. This was an order in council, or otherwise known as a Crown appointment. It's handled by the BRDO, which is the Board Resourcing and Development Office. And this is the group out of Victoria that handles all BC provincial Crown appointments. And years ago, they were the ones who appointed me to the Child Care Council. This came through, working a friend connection, but I was also already in the BRDO system. And once I completed my director's designation, I made sure that I was registered with that database. As with any government appointment. Politics does play a role, and with the newly announced provincial election, depending on who wins, there could be another shuffle in some of these senior appointments. My politics are private and neutral, and so this was reassuring for me because it affirmed that neutrality is not, I guess, a negative when it comes to these BRDO appointments. You don't have to have explicit affiliations with one party or the other. So that was great. And I had a friend through YPO, the Young Presidents Organization, who helped me by working a couple of back channels to make sure that my name was sort of moved along. And the fit for me is, I've got a real interest in good governance, good corporate governance. That's the reason I did my director's designation in the first place. And my long-term goal, if I think, out 10 years, what I'd like to be doing is doing corporate board work and teaching fitness classes. That's the vision for the 62-year-old Christy Miller. But there's a runway to get to that place in terms of building a CV of successively or complex board roles. And Douglas College is the second largest post-secondary institution in the province. So it's big and beefy, and I've been appointed to the Audit and Finance Committee as well, so lots of learning opportunity there. I also joined Lift Philanthropy Partners, and this is a group that, a group of broad business professionals, and they focus on social enterprises and amplifying and professionalizing the impact that those social enterprises have. And so this is a passion place for me. It sort of ties together my community interest with my interest in entrepreneurship. And this came about, again, through my YPO network, a different contact, but I spent a lot of time through the spring reaching out to people that I didn't know very well, having virtual coffees with them. For the first time in many years, I wasn't selling anything, I wasn't pushing a product, I wasn't looking for a deal, and I found that I had so many authentic conversations with people, really, really genuine connections. And so this is Glenn Wong of YPO, who has been on a number of different boards, who immediately sort of reached out and said, I'd love if you joined the Lift board. So that happened, I guess, in May or June. And so that kind of fills me up from a community perspective. And so moving down to slide number 10, that kind of, as I say, fills me up in terms of community boards. Any additional boards that I take on will be corporate or crown corporations as opposed to higher ed. And so then I got involved in 2 mentorship programs. Actually, there's one more here. There's actually two mentorship programs that I am mentoring for, and one where I am the mentee. And I do think that mentorships are incredibly important, both to give and to receive. So the mentorships that I signed up for as a mentor are the Entrepreneurship at UBC program, but also Mars Discovery District, which is Canada's innovation hub based in Toronto. And these are both new, they're really just kicking off. And Entrepreneurship at UBC will be sort of a broad mentorship, whereas the Mars mentorship will be focused on the fintech silo. So, fintech businesses that are looking to scale or they're in rapid growth mode. And then YPO has an annual mentorship, and I think an annual format for a mentorship has been quite useful for me. This will be my 3rd annual mentorship with YPO. And I've been paired with a guy who's crazy but brilliant. And so he told me he's 60, so he's 10 years older than I am. No, he's 66, so he's 16 years older than I am. But just has a very, very unique perspective, and it allows me to bounce a lot of ideas off of him. And because he's reached a point in his life where he believes in radical candor, I get absolutely straight goods back from him. So I'm now full up on community boards. I'm full up on mentorships. I've joined 2 corporate advisory boards. One is ISLE, which is, it used to be known as Lunapads. The company was established in 1993. They recently rebranded as ISLE. And these this company produces reusable menstrual pads or products. And it's, you know, the kind of product I can discuss candidly with a group of women. Men get kind of grossed out by it, but it's a category that's really, I think, found its time and place in history with the current focus on climate change and reducing carbon footprint and reducing waste. I think the world is finally ready for this product. I've known the founders for a long time. They're also heavily involved in the Entrepreneur of the Year program. But back in my days, you know, 2 funds ago, so back at Van City Capital, we made an investment in this company. And I've always really treasured these women and what they're trying to accomplish. And I bumped into them at Choices in the produce department. And I highlight this just because Vancouver is one of those cities where there are 2 degrees of separation. Everywhere you go, whether it's the hockey arena or the soccer field or walking the dog or grocery shopping, is an opportunity for networking. As soon as they heard that I had some capacity and some time, they said, we really want you on our board. And they said, you know, where we see you adding value is not only are we friends and is there values alignment, but we really want, you know, we've been at this business for a long time. We are looking to somewhere between, we'd like to quadruple or quintuple the size of the business and then sell it to a strategic buyer. You have lots of, you know, business scaling experience. You know how to raise the money. You know how to capitalize this. We would love your perspective and your eye to help us achieve that over the next few years. So it's a really interesting growth mandate. And we haven't even had our first board meeting yet, but they've already made it clear that they want me to take over as board chair within 18 months. So that's going to be, I think, a really exciting ride. And then I've also joined the advisory board for Private Debt Partners. And this is a group out of Toronto that's looking to raise a $750 million private debt fund. I first heard about them. A friend called and said, you should read this article in the Globe. Interesting group of people, one of whom I knew as an acquaintance from previous work. Interesting people raising an interesting fund. So I reached out to that person that I knew, and we had 2 incredible conversations. He then passed me on to the main people fundraising for Private Debt Partners. And again, really hit it off. We share a very similar view of the world. And I've now been invited to sit on their advisory board, which will be a national mandate, and there will be some publicity attached to that. The fit, obviously, this is exactly what I have done for most of my career in terms of specialized high yield finance, and they don't have someone who can advise them on a Western Canadian strategy. But again, I raise it because it literally started with reading an article in the newspaper and then figuring out who the people were inside the organization and just reaching out to them and having conversations. And it led to some really interesting things. So that's where I'm at right now in terms of corporate board work. I'm interested in doing more. And in terms of where I'm at right now, I've also thrown my name in the ring for the TransLink board. As with Douglas College, I think transportation is going to go through a huge paradigm shift in the next couple of years, probably for the next 10 years, frankly, as a result of COVID. I think there's this paradigm shift as people explore, sorry, my phone's ringing. As people explore new service delivery models, and how do you find that balance between saving the planet, low carbon footprint, and personal safety and health. So it's an interesting time, and ultimately the Mayor's Council decides who is appointed to that board. And Watson, which is the recruitment firm that works for TransLink, has recommended 5 people to the Mayor's Council, and I'm one of them. Do we still have sound? Can you guys still hear me?
Sorry, I had to unmute to answer you. Yep, still sound. We're still hearing you.
Okay.
I know this is hard for you speaking to a black void, but we are hearing you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So this is one I'll find out in about a month. Fingers crossed for me. I think it'd be a really interesting opportunity, both to learn and to give back. But it's a 1 in 5 shot at this point. And also looking at financial institutions, credit unions, and banks, where I can apply my financial services expertise. So working on that all concurrently. So that's a summary of the board work, mentorship, stuff that I'm looking at the moment. And then, the next big thing, which is, literally a hashtag that I had used in a LinkedIn post early in the year when I announced my departure from First West Capital. So I set up a company. It's called RTB Enterprises, and it's an acronym. And RTB does not stand for Red Trucks Brewing, which I've seen around town and had a bit of a chuckle over. It stands for Release the Beast, which is kind of the stage that I'm at right now. And RTB does a couple of things. So first and foremost, and I'm now, Donna, for your benefit, I'm on slide 14. I do some consulting work. I'm quite selective in terms of the consulting that I do, but where I see myself having value is providing advice in terms of strategic planning, governance, or financial management for companies that are growing quickly, but also for companies that need some capital, either to grow or to restructure, but they lack the in-house expertise or experience or resources to effectively articulate what their need is, advocate for themselves, go to market, pitch, and ultimately to evaluate different potential providers of capital. So I'm currently working on an engagement right now for a company that's got a huge potential order and is working to capitalize that order. And absolutely open for business. If you know of companies that require this kind of support, companies that might be challenged with their banks under current circumstances, or the opposite, companies that have exciting growth opportunities, things like the Business Credit Availability Program or the BCAP has some really, it's a great program, but it has some important exclusions. One of the most important being that it can't be used to finance any kind of acquisitions. And so some companies see attractive opportunities to vertically integrate, to buy a customer, to buy a supplier, and the BCAP can't be used to finance it. So that's the consulting side of my new venture. But in addition to that, I'm looking at raising a fund as well. So I have spent my career in the alternative private debt space. So not to get too technical, but if you imagine a place where the banks are no longer interested. So I get involved where the bank stops, but before control, interest, majority equity begins. That's where I've spent my career, and it's the place that I know. And I'm looking at offering a full product suite. So everything from asset-backed loans to trade finance to convertible debentures to mezzanine debt to minority equity or any combination of those things. And so primarily the focus will be on companies neutrally or positively impacted by COVID, but on an exception basis, we'll look at companies that have been hurt by the pandemic, but have some collateral that they're willing to pledge. And so I am currently fundraising. I have my lead investors in place and actively looking for opportunities. So RTB does both the consulting and the funding. So to sum it all up, and then we can open it up for a more fulsome discussion. What are the lessons learned? And I'm a little hesitant to use the past tense when I say lessons learned, because it's more like lessons learning and underway. But for me, lesson number one is exercise. I just need to keep my head clear, and I need to manage the stress and the anxiety and the uncertainty, but also the adrenaline of planning what's next. So exercise has been huge. Reflect, take a look inside, figure out what you love, what you don't love. For me, it's, organizational politics. So reflect, but not forever. So don't think so long that it becomes paralysis. Circling back to this topic of, the sale of our house, I think it's really important to either preserve financial flexibility so that you've got the power to choose and you buy yourself some time, or if necessary, create financial flexibility. And so for me, through the sale of our house, it means sitting debt-free on, a good stash of cash, which will make it possible for me to co-invest in some of these deal opportunities, which is important for signaling to investors that I'm committed. And it gives me the patience, time, flexibility, bargaining power to really be thoughtful about what I choose to do next. The other learning that's in progress for me is to really figure out how family fits for me. What do my kids need? What do I need? What does my partner need? And really having the discipline to walk that talk, to put those choices first on a consistent basis. The other thing I've learned is that as much as I wish it were true, the world isn't necessarily a meritocracy. And so also acknowledging that there are connections and there's a game that needs to be played, and to what extent am I willing to play it. I would also say that a huge learning for me is the importance of having lots of conversations, even the ones that seem random. And you know, one example that I'll draw for you is I did a course in Toronto last November. One of the session instructors, you know, as a matter of course, no pun intended, as a matter of course, whenever I'm out at a function, I connect with everybody on LinkedIn who's involved with it. I had posted something for LinkedIn in the spring around homeschooling, and this person reached out to me and said, you know, my wife is, she creates content and she publishes grade by grade workbooks. She's going all digital for COVID. Do you want a free trial? And I connected with this gentleman's wife. We really, really hit it off. I connected her with some people in the Entrepreneur of the Year program in Ontario. So it was this random connection through a course and then through kids. But what it's turned into is this gentleman is now supplying me with, you know, incredible quality deal flow that will help me to kickstart my fund, and also made an introduction to someone that I believe could be one of my most significant investors in a fund. And it all started because I helped out his wife with some business issues that she had. And it flowed, going back a step, course. So have lots of conversations. You never know where they're going to go. And I found people are refreshingly open to conversations because they crave human contact. And I think that that's something that I've been able to use to my advantage. Wrapping out the sort of tips list for me is have lots of irons in the fire, especially now with COVID. I find people are deferring and postponing major decisions. And so I'm hoping that my theory proves true, that having lots of irons in the fire, eventually something, you know, will come together that's great and give me that sort of fabric of interesting projects, the variety and the diversification. Second to last one is, you know, make the changes you know need to be made. I knew it was time to leave First West Capital. That wasn't fun anymore. And when it starts being an energy detractor rather than contributing to your energy, it's time to go. But also, I mean, I'll be very honest with you all. You know, I'm sure lots of babies were made through COVID and lots of couples have gotten closer. I'd say the opposite is true for me and my husband, and we're now talking about separation. And that's been tough, right? It's been really, really stressful. So lots and lots of changes this year. But in my heart of hearts, I know that it's a change that needs to be made. And so, you know, we're putting the pieces in place to make that happen. And then the last part, which I really am really terrible at, is try to be patient. You know, I found our new puppy helps me when I feel like I'm getting impatient, because I just go for a walk with the dog and I feel so much better when I come back. But it's a conscious effort to be patient and to let it sort of wash over me, and to take the time, to continue to take the time to reflect that I had in April and May, the things that were forced. I need to continue to take that time now. And things in general, I find, are moving quite slowly. People aren't making snap decisions. And so, you know, things that might have taken a week or two in the past take 3 or 5 or 10 times as long to progress right now. So it's not only about being patient with myself, it's about being patient with the world. So that's sort of the end of my musings, and really would like to just sort of open it up for questions or anything else that you'd like to explore. I hope that this has been useful in some way.
Thanks a lot, Christy. I forgot to mention at the beginning, I think I was feeling rushed because we were behind schedule. Just that if there are questions, please, you can put them in the Q&A section and we'll just field them there, or we can also unmute. Donna, you know a little bit more than I do about how people signal they want to be unmuted, but happy to have you use your voice if you want to. And while you're thinking about that, Christy, I had a couple of questions. When you made the decision to leave, you said you knew it was time, but I'm assuming there was fear there, because I think making a big change and stepping out of a secure job into the unknown is going to be wrought with a lot of uncertainty. Take back to that time when you were making that decision, and how did you get through that fear and keep moving forward? What do you think you credit that to?
Oh, well, it's interesting. So the methodology that I've always used to make tough decisions is a decision tree, right? So you map out each potential course of action and the sub-branches and the sub-branches, and you sort of blue sky, right? What's the best possible? What's the absolute worst possible? And if I'm getting ready to make a big decision and I map out what the worst case scenario looks like, if I can live with that worst case scenario, then I'm set free. I'm liberated to make that decision. So my worst case scenario was leave First West Capital, leave some money on the table by not being there for a buyout. Maybe my professional reputation is trashed. Nobody likes me. Nobody wants me. I'm all by myself. So my absolute worst case scenario was sell the house, live modestly, make soap on Galliano Island, where our cottage is, and knit and garden and spend a lot of time with my kids and my dog. And I decided that, we had enough equity in the house that, we could theoretically retire and live a modest life. And once I knew that I could do that, and that I wasn't, that I would sell the house if I needed to sell the house, once I mapped that out and decided that I was okay with that scenario, then there was nothing holding me back. I could, sort of trust my gut and go with it. So it was really about, for me, drawing out that decision tree and making sure that I was comfortable with any of the branches on it. But it is scary. I mean, there are times when, you think, gosh, did I make the right decision? It feels like it's been a long time and I didn't predict this pandemic. And I didn't even get into this, but, when I first left First West Capital in January, I was so tired, I thought I would never get back into the fund business. And now, a few months later, I'm talking about getting back into the fund business. And what's changed is this recession, right? There are companies out there that need a more creative approach to financing, and traditional providers are clogged or closed because they're afraid of their own shadows, and they're dealing with legacy portfolios that are in tough shape. And this is a great time to start a fund because it's less competitive. There are fewer providers of capital, and the need for creative capital is so much higher. This is exactly like 2010 when I started First West Capital. So it's just such a compelling situation, such a compelling need, that I found it's, this is what I do, it's what I know, so it's almost like a calling, and the timing is perfect for starting a new fund. But I would not have predicted this path in January.
Thanks. Do you have some suggestions on how someone who doesn't have a house to sell can manage these such changes? Like, obviously there's some security there, being able to sell your house, you've got funds to start your business, your fund, but also, if necessary, to live on, and then you've got the Galliano property as well. What do you suggest to women on this call who may not have that kind of those assets? Yeah,
I think, as I look at sort of there's a couple of things, irons in the fire, that I haven't mentioned, and one is teaching. There is paid board work that's out there that's quite interesting. The consulting world has been quite interesting because there are lots of companies who don't have a CFO, don't have a VP finance, don't have a board in place. So I think, if there's a core expertise that you have, if you can get out there and teach professional development courses for any associations, for years I've taught for the Chartered Professional Accountants, did it as a lark, but it's now something that I can spin into, a semester course for the business schools. So I'm talking to both Ivy and to the BD School of Management about teaching a couple of courses for them. Board work, as I say, can be paid. Consulting work, if you've got those areas of expertise that you can monetize. I think, we all hear a lot about the gig economy, but I think that there are piecework types of projects out there that can generate enough cash flow to take the pressure off. And it's a matter of figuring out what you know and what you have to sell and how you monetize it. But if you start it small and grow it, it can work its way up to being something really quite interesting. And, for me, it could even go to things like fitness instruction. I did my certification as a hobby 4 years ago, and am now being asked to teach classes. I've always done it as a volunteer, but now to do it on a paid basis. So I think it's really about understanding what you have that's sellable and putting yourself in a position where you can monetize it. It doesn't have to be about the sale of assets. It can be more about, generating a diversified base of current cash flow.
Yeah. I've heard a number of people saying because of this crisis, they wish that they had built up sort of savings. They hadn't spent all their earnings. And what do the rule of thumb, I think, is have enough to get you through at least 6 months to a year in the event of, something unexpected happening. But sometimes when you're early in your career, it's hard to save. But I like the idea of investing in other skills that you can utilize and capitalize on. As you said, you do training to be a fitness instructor. That's that was a hobby, but it's turned into something you can also do for revenue.
Yeah, exactly. And Vancouver is an expensive city. It is tough to save. So I think there's also the question of burn, right? When you look around, I would say, negotiate as much flexibility into your life as you possibly can. So my husband and I, are, for the time being, we're living in a rental. So we moved into a house that's, in a great location. It's a beautiful layout. The landlord wanted, a 12 month lease. And we said, we'd like 6 months and then month to month. Why? Because it gives us flexibility. And so although it didn't result in a reduction in the rent, it did give us flexibility, which can save us thousands down the road. So I think it's really a matter of looking at your burn, your costs, figuring out what options you have. Like, could two families get together and consolidate households if required? Can you have those conversations early to kind of plant the idea so that it's there as an option if you ever need to act on it? But also build in flexibility features to everything that you do so that you have more sort of escape hatches if you ever need them.
Okay, and moving on to another question, what do you do, or what tips do you have for others on ways that you can stay motivated when you kind of get into a lull or funk, and sort of restore and re-energize yourself? Because, obviously you were saying things are taking longer and longer. People are taking more time to make decisions, and sometimes it's hard to be patient. And then in that waiting, people can lose sight of their vision and lose and fall into a funk, is what I'm trying to say. So how would you suggest addressing that, and how do you address it in your personal life when you've had those moments?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I'm not sure that there's a magic answer. I go through these cycles, right? I consider myself a pretty high energy person, and I'm pretty self-motivated. And yet I go through these periods where I'm just like, oh, I need a sign from the heavens. I need something to happen. And really what I found, for me, it does come back to exercise. Get outside, I think April and May really made clear to me, when you're in that space where you're going to experience road rage today, or you're going to bite somebody's head off at the drugstore because you've just got that inner monster because you're stressed, right? I think having April and May be so quiet it made that inner monster, the stress monster, really, really stand out in sharp contrast for me. I know when she's rearing her ugly head, and I'm getting much better at saying, okay, no good, even if I'm late responding to something, even if I missed a deadline, no good can come from doing anything while I'm in this headspace. I need to go outside, work up a sweat, do something with the dog, soak in the tub, whatever it is, but I just need to stop. I need to tool down right now. And that's been really, really helpful. I've got great girlfriends. My mentors have been incredibly powerful. Sleep is, incredibly important, and everything gets worse if I'm not sleeping. Cuddling with my puppy and taking time to have some sort of quality interaction with each of my kids every single day has been absolutely critical for me. But still, there are these big fluctuations, these big ups and downs.
Yeah, I hear you on the sleep especially. That's something I've taken a huge interest in, and I'm really following and tracking my sleep now and trying to get better quality sleep, more deep sleep. And I find myself, I'm just able to deal with challenges in a much more effective way, and my mood is more consistent when I sleep well. Absolutely. Another question that came up is, what would you recommend to someone who's currently working, given the current sort of environment and what's going on in the economy right now? Would you recommend to stay where they are, while looking outward, or is this a time to go for it?
I think that's an incredibly personal decision, and I don't want to be on the hook for any choices people make. I do find what I would recommend is the methodology. The whole decision tree methodology has served me super well, because the discipline of it forces me to map out every single potential outcome. And then you can go beyond that and you can assign sort of probabilities, like what's most likely, what's least likely. There are a couple of things that you can scratch off and you say, okay, that's theoretically possible, but practically speaking, it's impossible. It just won't happen. And it can really make your decision making very, very clear, right? So eyes wide open. And I do swear by this process of mapping out the worst case scenario and then having a conversation with yourself. Could I do that? Am I willing to accept that? And if it means leaving a current employer, what if you're unemployed for 2 years? What would that look like? If it led to 18 great years after that, is it worth it? So, how much risk are you prepared to take on? Have you created enough financial flexibility for yourself? Do you have assets that you could sell or skills that you can monetize to generate cash flow? Can you control your burn? Like, is it money that you're worried about? Is it reputation? Is it boredom? Is it too much time at home with your spouse or your kids? Is it not having the right space? Like, what is it that you're afraid of? And can you live with it? And what does the absolute worst case scenario look like? And if you're okay with all that, and the people that you would have to depend on to make that worst case scenario livable, if they're all okay with it, then it's a go. But if you know in your heart of hearts that you just can't accept that worst possible case scenario, then stay put and wait until the storm passes.
Did you learn that decision tree sort of methodology from a mentor, or is that something you developed on your own?
Yeah, it actually came from the stats class that I took in business school.
Okay.
So decision trees are something that they use in statistics. It's all about calculating what they call expected value, right? So what you do is you map out each potential branch on a decision tree, and you come up with what's called terminal value. So at the end of that branch and the sub-branches, what's it worth in dollars? And then you attach a probability to it. And so you multiply the terminal value times the probability, and that gives you expected value. So in the stats class, the idea is whatever has the highest expected value in dollars is the choice you should make, because it's going to be the highest dollars times the highest probability. And I really liked the clarity of the approach, And so I started applying it to my personal life. And it's probably the only thing that I remember from statistics. I'll be really clear. That course was a struggle for me. But I just really like the concept and the discipline of it.
That's great. And you mentioned that you've had mentors throughout your career. How have you found your mentors? Where did you sort of source them, and how does that relationship get developed?
So for the last 3 years, I've gone through YPO's formal mentorship program. So you put in an application every year. You kind of say, you know, what's going on in your life and the area of your life that you'd like mentorship in. And so the wacky mentor that I have this year is because I put it straight out there. I said, I think I'm going to be going through a divorce. And so I don't need business mentorship this year. I need somebody who can counsel somebody going through marital issues. And so I got the crazy 66-year-old hippie who is exactly what I need this year. So YPO has a fairly sort of formal approach to mentoring and matching people. And they deliberately do the mentorships for 1 year at a time so that you have this relationship and you get out of it what you get out of it, and then you move on. It gives you the opportunity to work with multiple people. And as it happens, I've actually stayed in close contact with my previous 2 mentors because, and in fact, one of them is going to be my lead investor in this fund. So the relationships are very, very rich. But prior to YPO, and I was involved in peer mentoring with Nancy McKay CEO forums. But prior to that, early in my career, I reached out to people I admired, people that I thought were kind of strong, accomplished women, and I asked them for their time. And they were, more importantly, people who I felt I could strike the right tone with, people who would be really candid with me. And I probably reached out to do that for the first time when I was in my early 30s. And so I've been doing it for a long time now. And I've found in general, reaching out to people who I can just be really, really genuine with has been a good approach. One thing I did learn from all of that, though, is when you're looking for a mentor, it's really important to find somebody who's got capacity and give you some of their time. If they can't agree to give you a certain number of hours, you're not going to get much out of it. Or if they're not responsive when you try to get a hold of them, it doesn't count for very much. So I think checking in to make sure mentors have the capacity to actually mentor is important.
When you've reached out to people, sorry, go ahead.
I reached out, yeah.
Yeah, when you reached out to people like in your 30s, was this all done like without compensation to the mentor? Was it all just out of the kindness of their hearts?
Yeah, I've never paid for a mentor, nor have I ever been paid for mentoring. You know, I think it's a bit of a virtuous circle. I give and I receive. And no one has ever asked me for compensation. Yeah. One of the things that I've been told by the Entrepreneurship at UBC program is, you know, it's unpaid, but, you know, the opportunity for consulting work or investment opportunities or fractional CEO work, that's all totally on the table. So it may lead to something, but that's not really why I do it. But I have yet to be involved in a relationship like that doesn't, you know, pay off in some way or another, just because it gets back to having more conversations, right? And I've really enjoyed some of the mentorships that I've been involved with, particularly with millennials, just how they see the world. It's so different. And so I find I give even more than I receive, or I receive rather even more than I get.
Yeah, more than you give. Okay, thanks. Well, I think, you know, that's it in terms of questions that I've received, unless anyone else has any other questions. I haven't got any more here. Christy, I want to just say thank you so much for your time today. And I'm sorry we had this technical difficulty and people can't see your wonderful mascara and your face. And I want to wish you best as you're going through these personal changes and professional changes. And remind everybody that if you haven't already and you want to participate in Glow It in the Boardroom, there's a registration on the website for that. Happening next week, and it's a chance for us to just informally chat in small groups. So depending on the number of people, we'll break out into breakout rooms on Zoom and just kind of talk through what you might be going through, what we took away from this talk today, and maybe where that's taken you and your thoughts and plans. So thank you, everyone, and thank you again, Christy. Appreciate your time today.
Well, and thank you, everybody. I'm sure that it was user error on some of the tech stuff, so I really appreciate your patience and your accommodation as we worked through some of those tech issues. Hopefully it didn't affect the experience too negatively.
Yeah, no, it was great. You were very clear. Thanks again.
Awesome.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.